Thanks, Mary. Hi, everyone. So today I'd like to talk to you about some familiar things that I think you might already be doing in your practice as a software engineer, that if you put a slightly different lens on things, I think they're going to sharpen up your leadership skills and make you a better manager. But why is that even important? Because of this. A full 70% of the performance of a team is affected by their manager. This is from a book called It's the Manager. It's by Gallup, who write about identifying high-performing teams, and this is one of the things that they've spotted. The next quote from this article says, "Lousy managers create miserable employees who create negative business outcomes." So it's no wonder then, if you're thinking of taking on management, or are new to it, or just want to get better at it, that's kind of scary, right? That can make you feel intimidated and overwhelmed. You might be excited and happy, of course, to think about how you're going to be able to help your team better than before, but you might also be nervous about how to do a good job. Imagine yourself, a happy developer, shipping features, and your manager taps you on the back and says, "Hey, I'm too busy to take this meeting today. Can you stand in for me?" Or, "Hey, there's a leadership role coming up, and I think you should apply." Does that feel scary? Why? Because of this 70%. It's so important to do a good job. It's so important at work to feel like your manager has got your back and they're really setting you up for success. So as an example, the first time I had to do a salary review for one of my team, I agonized over it because it felt like such a huge responsibility to make decisions about somebody's salary, fundamental things about their career that would have repercussions not just immediately for them, but compound over the years. And I wanted to get it right. So I considered all the angles, and I weighed all the pros and cons. I really put a lot of work into it. And that process got me thinking about what I already knew as a developer and the ways that I was used to working, and how I could apply that to the new problems that I was solving. So today I want to show you some of those things that you might already be doing, and how I think they can help you transition into this new role. These are the things we're going to be talking about today, maybe some familiar terms in there. And these are some of the things that I started thinking about when I moved into a leadership role that made life a little bit easier. You don't have to throw everything away. You're not starting from scratch. The first principle, don't repeat yourself. When I was doing that salary review for the very first time, I was also worried that I'd done all this agonizing work and I'd thought really hard about how to make it right. And then because of the longer cadence and the rhythm of the work, I might not have to think about it for another few months or a year, and I'd forget everything that brought me to that decision. And that made me think how in code you have reusable modules. So I think that in management, the unit of reuse is the decision, or the decision-making process. It sounds really obvious, but that responsibility for decision-making is really the core part of a leadership role. And it's really important that those decisions are fair and consistent. If you're doing a salary review, you need to trust that your team need to be able to trust you that that decision is not going to come out differently, maybe better because you're happy because you had a good lunch that day, or worse because it's winter and you don't like the weather. So just like in code, you have reusable modules. If you're in a leadership role and you come up against a similar problem to one that you've solved before, you want to be able to really easily see your previous thinking and deploy the same solution. Because making those decisions is hard. It's exhausting. You want to get it right. You put a lot of work into it to make sure it is all those good things, fair and consistent. So replaying your decisions is a huge time saver for you as well. You don't want to have to solve the same problem twice. But how do you go about this? Just write it down. That's it. It's really simple. Make a template to make it easier to fill in next time. Make sure you save those things in a place you can find them. We keep these kinds of decision logs in our project plans. And I think of these as a little bit like a history of Git commits. Is a place for us to write down the why of why we made a decision a certain way, not just the what of what it was. So that when you do come back to it a few months or a year later, you can get up to speed really quickly and remind yourself immediately of your thought process. And what this gives you, once you've written all those individual things down and got all this lovely decision documentation saved somewhere you can find it, is a beginning of a bit of a process. And you might roll your eyes and think, oh, process. Be scared that everyone's going to think you're going to make them jump through these unnecessary hoops. But I don't think process should be scary. All it is a way to make those easily repeatable decisions that are fair and consistent and take into account the varied needs of everybody on the team. That's the goal, right? But don't reinvent the wheel. what you want to end up with is something like a run book or a playbook. So you don't have to remember all the steps each time you need to do something. You can just work your way through the checklist. And this is great when new managers join your team, because you can get them up to speed really easily. Or because you've now got that shared understanding of how you make those decisions, you can start delegating work to help your team grow. And this frees you up to work on the harder problems that you haven't solved yet. Maybe you need to figure out how to hire a new kind of engineer, or how to add levels to your career development framework. But if you're anything like me when I was an engineer, you have to resist the urge to over-engineer these things. As developers, we try not to do too much work up front, just the right amount. As a manager, you get those same principles, same benefits by applying these principles. So don't try and force things. Make sure you've had a few cycles and shaken out the edge cases before you sort of try to make anything too formal. And when you do have to start formalizing things, don't make there be too many steps. If someone has to fill out a spreadsheet and then put a screenshot in a Word document, they're not going to do it. As with code, you want a clear path people can easily follow. I work in a team of managers, so I wondered if we could apply any of this to the way that we work together. But in the same way that you can apply product team thinking in your personal projects, I think that you can apply these principles if you're just working on your own as a manager or leader too. We've been doing some of this for a little while now, and what we found is that all of the things that make a software engineering team work really smoothly also help a management team work really smoothly. So working in sprints lets you prioritize your longer-term goals against that day-to-day, business-as-usual, keeping the lights on work. Having a team sprint board makes sure we're always asking, what's the thing I can do today that will move us towards our sprint goals? It makes work visible to everybody. Stand-ups have the same function as in a product team. We set our intention for the day. It keeps you connected. It means you can easily see if somebody's becoming overloaded or blocked. And there are reasons pairing is useful in software development. We learn from each other, we share knowledge, just get out of our own heads a bit and have somebody to kind of bounce ideas around with. You don't need to lose that just because your end product is different and you're doing different work. All the things that are true of pairing on code are also true of just pairing. You can pair on a blog post or a talk, or role-play some feedback that you need to give. I think there's this misguided expectation now. People sort of think, oh, you're the leader, you have to have all the answers. And that's just not true at all. If you collaborate and work together on your projects, you're going to have a much better outcome than if you're just stuck in your own head. And this applies to getting feedback on your work as well. If you're applying this kind of product thinking to your work, for example, building your career development framework, that end product is going to be so much better if you get the input and advice from the people who are actually going to be using it. And retrospectives, probably the single most important thing I think we do as engineers and as leaders. You need to have a lot of different experiences to learn, but unless you reflect on them, you'll never truly learn from them and be able to improve. And you can do this on your own. Even if you're the only manager and you're not in a team, or you think it's weird to have a retro just for yourself, go for it. Keep a journal. Talk about your week in your own one-on-ones with your manager. This time for reflection is really important. So these are just some of the things that I think you may be already doing as an engineer that you can bring with you on this new journey. I'm sure you can think of lots more. And I hope I've encouraged you today to think back on your own experiences as a developer and see if you can look at your work in that slightly different way and add things to this list. You don't have to throw everything away. You're not starting from scratch. You got this. Happy leading. Thank you. Thank you very much.